Have you ever heard of a war starting over an ear? No, I'm not kidding. A single severed, and frankly, very old ear. Buckle up, because today we re-diving into one of the strangest conflicts in history, the War of Jenkins Ear. The year is 1731. We're in the middle of the Caribbean, a hotbed of tension between two colossal empires, Great Britain and Spain. The British are hungry for trade, especially with Spain's rich American colonies. But Spain has a strict no trespassing policy. They only allow one British ship per year to trade at their ports, a deal made under the Treaty of Utrecht. Naturally, where there are rules, there are rule breakers. Smuggling becomes a massive, and very profitable, industry for British sailors. The Spanish, in response, deploy their own coast guard, the guardacostas*, to patrol the seas and clamp down on this illegal trade. These patrols were basically legalized privateers, and they weren't exactly known for their gentle touch. Enter our man of the hour, a British merchant captain named Robert Jenkins. He's commanding his ship, the Rebecca*, probably loaded with more than just legal cargo. When he's stopped by the Spanish ship La Isabella*, the Spanish captain, Juan de Leon Fandino, boards the Rebecca*, accuses Jenkins of smuggling, and things get heated. According to Jenkins, Fandino's men ransacked his ship. Then, in a moment of pure pirate-style drama, Fandino ties Jenkins to the mast, pulls out his sword, and slices off one of Jenkins' ears. As the story goes, Fandino then sneeringly tells him, "Go, and tell your king that I will do the same." If he dares to do the same, he then hands the severed ear back to Jenkins. Brutal, right? Now, here's where it gets interesting. Jenkins doesn't just toss the ear overboard. Oh no. He preserves it, probably in a jar of brandy, and sails back to England. You might think this shocking event would immediately spark a war, but it didn't. In fact, for 7 long years, nothing much happened. The incident was reported, filed away, and largely forgotten by the government. Jenkins' ear sat on a shelf, patiently waiting for its moment in the spotlight. So what changed? Politics, of course. By 1738, tensions between Britain and Spain were at an all-time high. The British public was furious. Stories of Spanish cruelty and attacks on British ships filled the newspapers. Merchants were losing money, sailors were losing their livelihoods, and national pride was on the line. A powerful political faction in Parliament, known as the Patriots, saw an opportunity. They were itching for a fight with Spain, both to protect trade and to challenge the Prime Minister, Robert Walpole. Walpole was a man of peace. He believed war was bad for business and had spent years trying to negotiate with Spain. But the war hawks were gaining momentum. They needed a poster boy, a symbol of Spanish injustice that could rally the public and force Walpole's hand. And then, someone remembered Captain Jenkins and his pickled ear. In March 1738, Robert Jenkins was summoned to appear before the House of Commons. Imagine the scene, a packed chamber, politicians baying for blood, and in walks this sea captain. He recounts his tale of woe, the humiliation, the violence. And then, for the grand finale, he produces the ear itself. It's shriveled, brown, and probably pretty disgusting, but it's incredibly effective. Holding up the grisly artifact, he reportedly declared, "I commended my soul to God, and my cause to my country." The room erupted. This was the proof they needed. The story, whether completely true or slightly embellished, was the perfect piece of propaganda. It was personal, it was visceral, and it was an insult to the entire British nation. The public went wild. The no-search policy on British ships became the rallying cry. Walpole's peaceful approach was now seen as weak and cowardly. The pressure became immense. The newspapers had a field day, printing cartoons and articles lambasting the Spanish. The war party in Parliament, led by figures like William Pitt, relentlessly attacked Walpole. They argued that national honor was at stake. How could Great Britain, the ruler of the waves, allow its subjects to be mutilated by a rival power? Finally, backed into a corner, Prime Minister Walpole had no choice. He could either declare war or lose his job. On October 23, 1739, Great Britain officially declared war on Spain. The war that followed was unjust called the War of Jenkins Ear. That was a nickname given to it decades later by the historian Thomas Carlyle. At the time, it was simply the start of a much larger, global conflict. The initial stages of the war saw some British success. Admiral Edward Vernon became a national hero after capturing the Spanish port of Portobello in Panama with just 6 ships. Bells were rung across London in celebration, and a new song, Rule Britannia, was composed to mark the victory. This early win fueled the public's patriotic fervor even more. However, that success was short-lived. The war soon bogged down. The British launched a massive and disastrous attack on Cartagena de Indias, a major Spanish stronghold in modern-day Colombia. It was one of the largest amphibious assaults in history up to that point, but it ended in a catastrophic failure. Disease, poor planning, and a formidable Spanish defense led by the brilliant one-armed, one-legged commander Blas de Lezo resulted in a humiliating defeat for the British. Thousands of British soldiers and sailors died, not from combat, but from yellow fever and dysentery. The war dragged on for years, spreading from the Caribbean to North America, where it was known as King George's War. It eventually merged into the much wider conflict of the War of the Austrian Succession, a massive European power struggle that drew in France, Prussia, and Austria. The original dispute over Jenkins' Ear was almost completely swallowed up by this larger conflagration. When the dust finally settled with the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle in 1748, what was the result? Well, almost nothing changed. Both sides essentially agreed to return to the way things were before the war. The trade disputes that started the whole thing were left unresolved. Britain had spent a fortune and lost thousands of lives for very little tangible gain. Spain kept its colonies, and the smuggling continued. So, what's the takeaway from this bizarre story? The War of Jenkins' Ear is a perfect example of how a small, personal incident can be manipulated by politics and public opinion to ignite a major international conflict. Was the war really about a single ear? Not really. The ear was just the spark. The real fuel was a potent mix of economic rivalry, national pride, and political ambition. It shows how easily the narrative of a single victim can be used to justify a war that serves the interests of powerful people. And what about Robert Jenkins? After his moment of fame, he faded back into obscurity. He was given another ship command, but was later accused of perjury in a different case, and his career fizzled out. He died a few years later, his famous ear having outlived its usefulness. It's a strange but powerful lesson from history, a story of how a preserved body part, a savvy sea captain, and a whole lot of political spin led to great empires into a costly and ultimately pointless war. It reminds us to always look beyond the headline-grabbing incident and ask what larger forces are really at play. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into one of history's weirdest wars. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next historical adventure. Let me know in the comments what other strange historical events you'd like me to cover. See you next time.